Hi there guys, got a video here for you today on AGT Uragan 2. So in this one what we're going to be doing is taking a good look over the rifle. I have been shooting it over the weekend, so what I'm going to do is give you my overview thoughts on it, tell you some of the things I like, what I don't like about the rifle, and just give you some basic information on it. Before we begin though, I do just want to say a big shout out to everyone over at the Crawley Surplus store. I've been looking for a Uragan 2 fitted with a carbon stock for quite some time now, but I've been unable to find one. However, after a nice phone call with the fellas over at the Crawley Surplus store, they spoke to the importers and they located me one. We then obviously RFD'd it down to Crawley Surplus where I picked it up. And like most of the rifles that you see on the channel, this one was bought with our own money. With all that said, let's get into the overview. Now the first thing I want to talk about is the stock itself. So as I said before, this is the carbon fibre one, and it's incredibly well finished. I'm really happy with the stock on this rifle. I was a little nervous when I first got it. I thought it might feel a little cheap, a little plasticky, but I can safely say that's not the case. It feels really solid in the hand. It's got a nice shaped grip on it with a nice thickness to it. It's probably one of the first rifles on the channel that I'm not going to have to complain about grip thickness. The length of pull is still a little short for me, however I'm fairly tall, so that's the case with most rifles, and it's probably a me problem rather than a problem with the rifle. Now aside from the carbon fibre being incredibly nice to look at, it does also serve a very important purpose. It lightens the rifle up quite substantially over both the synthetic and the laminate stocks. And the box weight of one of these rifles with no bipod or scope fitted is around 3.2 kilograms with the laminate and synthetic stocks. But this one with the carbon stock fitted comes in at around 2.7 kilograms, so about half a kilogram of weight saving with the carbon stock fitted. That does obviously make the front end feel a little heavy, but because it's a bullpup and it's nice and close to your shoulder, it's not an off-putting weight distribution. And at the end of the video I'll pop the stock off and you can have a look inside. We'll take a look at the actual action of the rifle itself. Next though, we'll move into the centre of the rifle with the trigger, the cocking helm and the rail at the top. So starting off with the trigger on this rifle, and it's a real nice two-stage trigger. You do have a small amount of adjustment with it, but from the factory it was set up pretty good. Did have a tiny amount of creep on the second stage, but just a quick adjustment in the back here with an Allen key solved that. And that little bit of tweaking produced a trigger that's absolutely beautiful. Nice and light, a good first and second stage with a nice stop to it. It is obviously a linkage trigger being a bullpup, but I couldn't detect any sort of bending or movement in the linkage itself. The trigger blade itself is plastic, which I was a little disappointed in at first, but when you consider that the active market for this rifle is primarily hunting, you can understand why they did that. Moving on to the cocking arm. The cocking arm on this rifle is flippable, so I've got it on the right hand side at the moment. You can obviously fit it to the left. It did come installed on the left hand side from the factory, but I always swap them over to the right as that's the side that I prefer my cocking arm on. I just find it easier to shoot that way, but obviously that's just personal preference. The stock is obviously ambidextrous, so you've got no problems there if you're a right or left-handed shooter. And then moving up to the top, we see the top Picatinny rail, and the rail itself does have 20 MOA of adjustment pre-built into the rail. What this means is that the rail is actually tilted downwards, pointing towards the barrel, and that's primarily done for the longer range shooting and to pre-compensate for the pellet drop. Now I will mention that I did have to fit adjustable mounts to this rifle in order to get myself zeroed at 50 yards. The 20 MOA of adjustment was a little too much for my scope. I couldn't get the crosshairs high enough to align with where the pellet was impacting. Not a problem with adjustable mounts though, as I just took the 20 MOA of adjustment out in the mounts. But that's just something to keep in mind. If you had a scope with a larger amount adjustment, you probably wouldn't need to do that, but I did for the Element Helix. Right then, so next up we'll move to the front of the rifle and we'll start talking about the barrel and the shroud. So first of all, I'll take the shroud off, or the moderator. And there we see the end of the barrel. So the end of the barrel comes to about here, and the overall length of the barrel is 360 millimeters. This particular barrel is a CZ barrel, and from my testing over the weekend it proved incredibly accurate. So if we have a look at the end there, We see a M14 by 1.25 on the barrel itself. It's not a 1/2 inch UNF rifle, and the barrel comes all the way back to here. So from tip to tail, 360mm. Right then, so while we're on the subject of barrels, I do just want to say that the actual length of the barrel itself is no indication of how accurate a rifle will be. There are some advantages of running a longer barrel, but just because a barrel is longer doesn't necessarily mean it will be any more accurate. But as I said before, this one is a CZ one, and we'll take a very close look at the crown there. Hopefully the camera will pick that up, but it is a very nice crown. I have checked it. It's nice and concentric, and the actual finish of the crown itself is very nice. And while we've got the mod off, I'll just give you a quick look inside the mod. So taking a pin punch or something similar, point it through the hole there, we can unscrew the two halves of the moderator. And here's the internal core of the moderator itself. So a very nicely finished unit, lots of baffles in there. If I'm 100% honest with you, in my testing, these funny shaped baffles in moderators in general, not just in this rifle, aren't the best for sound suppression. What I've found best is horizontal baffles, or vertical baffles with a small hole in the middle for the pellet to go through. That forces the air back more efficiently. But this unit here works quite well. I would say that this on its own doesn't need an external moderator. You can fit one. The end of the shroud here is fitted with a M14 by 1.25. So if you felt you need more additional moderation, you can just put one on the end there. But there that is there. And then finally, moving to the front of the rifle, we have the bottle. So this is a 210cc bottle, and the rifle itself is set up fairly well in that you do get a fair number of shots out of the rifle. In my experience, while shooting the rifle over the weekend, we were sort of getting one shot per bar of air, and the regulator on this rifle is set at just under 100 bar. So that means from a 200 bar fill, we was getting roughly 100 shots, and from a 300 bar fill, we was getting just under 200, which is a fairly decent setup from the factory with such a short barrel. We will obviously try and improve that in the near future, but you just have to keep an eye on the channel if you're interested in that sort of thing. And the last thing on the front of the gun is this very nice aluminium handguard at the front here with the bipod mount. So it's slightly forward of the original one, which is under this. I think the AGT or the Uragan 1 did come with a plastic version of this, and then the aluminium one was bought out at a later date, although this is fitted from factory with the aluminium one, which is very nice to see indeed. So it protects your bottle nicely and gives you a little further forward mount for your bipod. Before we have a look at the groups that we've done with this rifle over the weekend, I'll just run through quickly what exactly you get in the box. So firstly, you do get quite a nice AGT branded padded bag. I prefer hard cases if I'm honest, but it's nice that they actually gave you something to store the rifle in. Next up, obviously you get the rifle, 2 magazines. Next up is a fairly nice manual. Got the usual things that you want to see in a manual, just a general overview of everything. But what I like about it is it tells you all the O-ring sizes that are in the rifle. So it gives a full list of the O-rings and also an exploded diagram of the rifle. Wish more companies would start doing that. That is incredibly useful when you're actually working on your rifles, and really helps if you ever need to replace an O-ring or anything like that. You got exactly what you need in the back of the manual. So AGT get a thumbs up for that. And then finally, the box at the end here with just some bits and pieces in. You do get a key ring, a pen, a fill port, although it doesn't come with the Foster fitting adapter. The actual fill port itself is fitted to this sort of whipped in thing. I don't use them things. They're quite awkward if you have multiple different rifles. So me and my dad share a bottle over at the range, so we can't actually use this, but you can take the fill probe off and just fit one of these standard best fittings Foster fitting adapters, and it works just fine. The last thing I want to talk about is the mat at the bottom here. Now this wasn't actually included in the box with the rifle. I did have to email the UK importer. I have seen other reviews on YouTube and read other reviews on forums and such, and people are claiming that they get these in the box, but mine wasn't in there, so I just quick email to the importer and they sent one out to me. It does have sort of a mini exploded diagram of a few rifles in the AGT range. So we have the Vixen, the Vulcan, and obviously the Uragan 2 over here. Doesn't tell you O-ring sizes or anything like that, but it is nice to get a mat in the box that you can put your rifle on when you're sort of doing bits and pieces. With that all out the way, we'll take a look at the range results that this rifle produced over the weekend. So all of these groups here are 5-shot groups, all at 50 yards. So from a sub 12 rifle with a short barrel, that's nothing to be sniffed at all. Really happy with how this rifle shoots. It's incredibly accurate, incredibly easy to shoot, and it's probably one of the best, if not the best, out-the-box rifle that I've shot in quite some time. We obviously had the Catran a little while ago, and that was very good, possibly on par with this, although I'd say that this is slightly more accurate straight out the box. I have circled a few pellets here that are just random pellets that appeared on the target, so we take a closer look here. If we look at the circles are roughly 24mm in diameter, and pretty much all the groups here are well within that. If we look at this one over here, which is probably the best group, take a measurement of it there, probably a 10mm edge to edge group. These are obviously 177 pellet holes, so that would be a centre to centre group of around 5.5mm. With that all out of the way, we'll get the stock off and take a look at the action. So as we can see here, the rifle is primarily constructed of 2 blocks, one at the front, one at the back, and then they're joined by the plenum in the middle. We will obviously do a full disassembly at a later date, but this is just a little overview of it. We have the trigger linkage here, we have the hammer spring and hammer in this area here. You do have your hammer spring adjuster in the back here. Mine wasn't fitted with any anti-tampers. Does have a lock screw in the base and then the screw in the back there to adjust your power. Obviously this is a sub 12 pound rifle and we're shooting at around 11.3, 11.4 foot-pounds. From what I can see just looking at it here, everything is incredibly well finished, incredibly well constructed, and it looks very robust indeed. Now while we're at this stage here, I do just want to point out that probably the most annoying feature of this rifle, and that is when you take a shot you do get a fair ring from the plenum. So I'll try my hardest to get a good audio recording of it so you can hear it, but if we put it up to the microphone, hopefully you can hear that, but you do get a rather loud ping from the plenum itself. I'm guessing it's the valve spring pinging, and that's definitely something I'm going to have a look at and see if we can solve. So I'll give you a very brief close-up of the action with the stock off. They're very nicely constructed. Hopefully you'll see it there. We have the trigger mechanism at the back. We will obviously be doing a full strip down of this rifle in the near future, but that's obviously going to come at a later date. And then finally, I'll give you a good look at the stock. So this is the carbon stock as we mentioned before. Hopefully you'll be able to see in there, it's not too dark. It's very nicely finished. Does look a bit ropey on the inside, but that's normal for sort of carbon fibre and fiberglass moulds in general. Sort of one finished side, one rough side. But you never really see anything in there. And when you actually pick up the carbon fibre stock, if you took this back piece off, it really wouldn't weigh anything at all. I've just put the carbon stock on the scale, and with the butt piece installed it weighs 250 grams, so pretty much nothing. Really impressed with the carbon stock. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it in person, but it's even better in person than you see it in the videos and in pictures. The videos and pictures really don't do it justice. It's a nice shaped stock, and I'm really happy that I picked the carbon one. Right then, with that all out of the way, before you go, I do just want to run through a few things which I found when I was testing the rifle. So firstly, when I first got the rifle, put it over the chronograph, I was a little concerned. The actual shot-to-shot deviation was quite extreme, and the regulator had quite a large amount of creep on it, meaning that the first shot was always 10 to 15 feet per second high, then the other ones would drop down. However, after about 200 shots or so, the regulator freed off and then started performing absolutely beautifully. The first shot string I did with the rifle had about a 50 feet per second spread, and then the second one had around a 15 feet per second spread over 200 shots. So I was a little concerned at first, but after shooting the rifle for a little while, everything bedded in, the regulator settled down, and the rifle now is absolutely beautiful. So with that all being said, what I thought we'd do at the very end was I'll just give you my final thoughts over the rifle. So we'll start off with the bad or the negative points of the rifle. Number one is the large amount of valve ping that you get from this rifle. You do hear it quite a lot when you've got your ear to it. Secondly, in my case, I did need adjustable mounts in order to zero the rifle at my chosen shooting distance, which was 50 yards. The last thing I want to mention, it's not really a negative, but I do want to mention it, is that it did take probably 200 shots through the rifle to get the regulator working as it should. But that's pretty much the only negative points I can think of on the rifle. Everything else has been an absolute joy to use. The grip and stock feels fantastic. The accuracy is absolutely phenomenal out of the box. It gives a good number of shots with such a small bottle and such a short barrel. The shroud is nice and effective. It's not silent, but it is good enough so that you wouldn't need to purchase an additional suppressor to put on the end. The actual fit and finish of the rifle, the quality of the anodizing and the overall look of the rifle is absolutely amazing. It is obviously a premium rifle, but you do definitely get what you pay for. The two magazines cycled and worked beautifully. I did try single shot loading this rifle, but there was no difference between single shot loading and shooting straight out of a mag. The magazines both cycled perfectly, and there was no difference or no noticeable difference between the two magazines in terms of accuracy. The two-stage trigger for a bullpup rifle is phenomenal, no complaints there, and the actual handling and the feel of the rifle is really quite good. You get a nice, usable, pointable rifle that's both comfortable off the bench and off hand. But with all that being said, that's pretty much going to do it for this video, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.